officially launch the book. We will then hear from some representatives of the Ukrainian community. We will hear short readings from the anthology, from 3 of the writers, and from John Farrelly, who is one of the editors of the book. Before we conclude, Paul will lead us in the singing of the Ukrainian national anthem. Those of you who know it, you can better keep off your phones all the same. And we will then have some concluding remarks, and then the book will be available for purchase. The protest on Orwell Road, which is the inspiration for this anthology, began on the 24th of February 2022. 434 days later, it still continues. Even as I speak here, we all suspect that Micheál from Kilkenny, who has the loudest voice in Ireland, is letting the Russians know what he thinks of them. So even while we launch the book, the protest continues. Those who protest arrived as individuals, but we are now a community of friends. We have been moved to action by wanton murder of innocent civilians, by mass kidnappings, particularly of children, by appalling war crimes, such as rape and the targeting of civilians, and by a torrent of lies which has come from the embassy and its nest of spies. And in the longer term, we have a fear that success for Russia now will not end war, but will lead to the spread of war. Sometimes people say to us, "Are you wasting your time? You're not achieving very much." My answer to that is to remind them the story of Martin Luther. In 1522, Luther was summoned to the Diet of Worms by the emperor, and he was expected to recant his views in exchange for saving of his life. He knew that otherwise he would be burned at the stake for heresy. But Luther made a great cry for freedom of conscience. He said, "Here I stand, I can do no other." In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to Peter Sheridan, who's going to launch the book. He's one of Ireland's best-known playwrights and directors and authors. It is a privilege for us to have him here. He's a man, all of whose writings are marked by a strong social conscience. My own favourite work of his is Borstal Boy, his adaptation for screen of Behan's autobiography. One of the great portrayals in the film is of the unlikely friendship between Behan, an Irish Republican, and Charlie Millwall, who is amazingly played by a superb young Danny Dyer. And it is a testament to the triumph of friendship and humanity over mere ideology. So I now ask Peter to introduce, or to launch the book.
I don't have any compunction now when I go into the church of going up to the front to take a seat. I don't care anymore. That's when I do go to a funeral. Yeah. When the whole Ukraine thing started to happen and these colours appeared, this yellow and blue, it brought me back to my childhood. Because I supported a football team that wore those exact colours. They were called Drumcondra FC, better known as Drums. And I see Mary Lou here, but they were also Bertie Ahern's team. But my dad used to bring us to Talca Park to see Drums play most Sundays on the bike. My dad, 3 of us on the bike with him. One on the bar, one on the back, and one on the handlebars at the front. Parked the bike and into the match. And I had a lesson that happened to me watching a Drums match one day that's kind of germane to this whole Ukraine thing. And it starts with the colours, these amazing colours of yellow and blue. Because they were the colours that Drumcondra wore. And no other team in Ireland wore those colours. And I can remember them so vividly in my childhood. And I also remember that Drums, or Drumcondra, had the first person of colour playing in the Irish League of Ireland.
Ray Keogh.
Ray Keogh, good man, who said that? See, there's always people who know. His proper name was Rachel Keogh, of course. Rachel, he actually came from a country where Rachel was a boy's name. He was our best player. And something happened one day that was both funny and instructive for me. I learned a huge lesson from it. He put in a tackle on a guy. The guy fell over and the referee sent him off, sent Rachel Keogh off. Red card. No red cards in them days. He just got the hand. So he's walking over to the sideline looking pretty dejected. And a guy in the crowd beside us. Now don't forget, in these days there would be 20,000 people at a match in Talca Park. It was a lot of people. But one guy with a very loud voice, probably that fella down in the embassy, shouts out, "Hey ref, 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 that's racial discrimination, that is." Now, just like the way you reacted, that's how the crowd in Talca Park reacted. And I didn't know why it was funny. I was 10 years old, I had no idea why people were laughing. So afterwards I said to my dad, "Dad, why was that funny when the man said that's racial discrimination?" He said, "Well, you know, son, like, not everybody gets an equal chance in life. There are people who are put down because of the colour of their skin." So I had this conversation with my dad. And it was the first time I'd ever become aware of something called discrimination because of the colour of your skin. And because it related, obviously, to a footballer that I adored and loved, and a team I supported who wore blue and yellow. When the Ukraine thing happened, I had a lot of memory things going back to that day in Talca Park, you know. And then looking through these contributions that people have made, extraordinary contributions, and there's a lovely sort of tone that develops as you read through these pieces. And you spoke about it in your introductory remarks. And it's about fellowship. It's about being part of something. I remember when the Dunn Stores thing happened, when there was the refusal to, the girls down on Henry Street refused to handle the Dunn Store stuff. And I remember going down one day, and Kathleen Bean had been brought in. She was living in a home out in Sybil Hill, and she was in a hospital there, in an old folks hospital. And they brought her in, and she stood in Henry Street and sang the Bold Fenian Men. I think she was probably 90 or 91 at the time. And just the impact of that on people walking by, in the same way that the impact of you people up there doing this is really profound. It touches people in a very deep and a very profound way. It's hard to describe, and you don't know the impact you're having. Sometimes these things, you don't know the impact they're having. But the fact is that the whole infrastructure collapsed in South Africa because people cared. People said silence is not enough. And there were lots of things happening, both obviously in Dublin and London and places around the world. And ultimately, South Africa wanted to be part of the family of nations again. And they decided they had to do something. I'm not saying that will happen in Ukraine, but I'm just saying that you don't know the impact that you're having. One of the other things that struck me reading through the pieces is the fact that being Irish, we can't help sometimes being funny in a really good way, just like the Rachel Keogh story. It's kind of funny, but it's instructive. And there's stuff in this. There's a piece in this where there's a dog who's the central character of the story. There's a rescue dog. Tells the story of what it's like to be the rescue dog down there while everything's going on. Now, this rescue dog is welcoming other dogs, but as long as they don't try and take over being top dog. I thought that was a brilliant observation. And I thought the piece about the parody about Philotop was very funny. In fact, it reminded me of Brendan Behan talking about Borstal Boy, because Behan wrote a play called The Hostage. And it was written at a time when Khrushchev was the guy in Russia. And Behan wrote this thing, and the big thing at that time was exploration of space and landing on the moon. And Behan, being a Dublin man, couldn't help but say, "I ask you, Mr. Khrushchev, please listen to my words. Don't muck about. Don't muck about. Don't muck about with the moon." I know that expression. Don't muck about with the moon. Anyway, what comes through from all of these collecting, when you put them all together, is the idea that you can't be silent. You can't remain silent. It's too horrific not to say something. You can't just ignore it. And that's what your protest is about, and what this book is about, and what your contributions. That sometimes silence is not acceptable. And again, that takes me to another great Irish writer, Samuel Beckett. Samuel Beckett was living in Paris during the war, and he joined the resistance. He was a very big player in the resistance in Paris. But they got word to him that the Gestapo were on to him, so he had to get out of town. So Beckett left with his partner Madeline, and they headed south. And he went down south and he worked in hospitals. And he eventually ended up working for the Irish Red Cross in 1946 and 1947. And this is his Irish conscience. We have a conscience, Irish people. You can feel it from us. We can't stay silent. So Beckett, after the war finished, sat down to write his masterpiece, Waiting for Godot. Except he didn't know what to say. All he knew was that the world had changed in a profound way, and he couldn't remain silent. So he wrote Waiting for Godot. And he's really kind of saying in it that redemption isn't possible in this world anymore after what happened in the camps. How can there be redemption? Godot is not going to show, guys. Call him God if you like, or whatever. But Godot ain't coming. So put silence, but you have to say something. And Beckett had those great lines where he'd say, I can't go on. I must go on. I will go on. We have to go on. We have to articulate something. We have to say something. And Beckett has this amazing ability as a writer to put it in a kind of a really profound context, where one of the characters in Waiting for Godot, the character is called Pozzo. He gave the 4 characters in the play international names to give it this idea that it's a kind of a play that isn't about one place in particular, but about lots of different places. So Pozzo, who's this character in the play, comes in the first act of the play, and he has a slave. A guy with a rope around his neck is called Lucky, which is very English. And he treats Lucky very badly. He throws the food on the ground for him and tells him to go get it. He treats him appallingly. And it's really a metaphor for how the world is at that point. That some big powers try to treat small powers in a really disgusting fashion. But in the second act of the play, Pozzo appears again with Lucky in the play, only he's blind. And people, when they saw the play first, were like, how can the guy be blind? Like, he could see like a half an hour ago, and now he's blind. But what Beckett is kind of suggesting is that he was actually more blind in the first act, when he could see than when he couldn't see. But the question that the 2 tramps in the play keep asking is, when did you go blind? When did you go blind? And that's the question that you protesters are asking out beyond. How did this happen? When did this happen? You know, the Filatov lie that you talk about, so many of you refer to. Of course we're not going to invade. We will invade. All of this complete contradiction that seems to be taking place. And the 2 tramps keep asking this Pozzo character in Beckett's play, when did you go blind? When did you go blind? And eventually Pozzo loses the cool. And he has this explosive speech where he shouts out at them, when? One day. One day like any other day. One day we go deaf, one day we go blind, one day we're born, and one day we die. It's the same day, the same second. They give birth to stride of the grave. The light gleams an instant, and then it's night once more. Jesus, what a speech that is. About what we are, who we are on this earth for. Not out of any religious or spiritual thing, but out of a humanitarian thing. It's humanitarian concern. That we have a very short time on this planet. And knowing that we have a very short time on this planet makes what is happening so disgusting in Ukraine. It's impossible to ignore. It's impossible not to have a view. That's what Beckett is saying in his masterpiece. You can't say nothing. You have to say something. And you're performing a really important function out there by making it possible for the rest of us to glory in what you're doing, because we don't have the time. We're working, we're busy, we're doing things. But there's a group of people, and I am so proud of what you've been doing there for the last year and a half or more. And this contribution, this little book here, is an absolute gem that that everybody in Ireland should have in their home. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. So congratulations to you. You made my publishing week, my publishing year with this wonderful collection.
Thank you very much, Peter. You said that you have to race for a seat in the church. Some of us, our problem is that when we get the seat, we can't get up again, so you're very, very lucky. Our next speaker is Artem Nedostov. Those of us who protest at the embassy know Artem very well. He arrived in Ireland in 2014 to work here in Dublin. He quickly became involved with the Ukrainian community. He is a point of contact for us with the Ukrainian embassy and the wider Ukrainian community. He's going to give a synopsis, and I don't envy the task he has to do now, of what Peter has just said. Artem, please.
First of all, massive thanks to all of you for attending, but special thanks to everybody who wrote their pieces in this book, but also to the wider protesters group. I believe everybody from the Ukrainian community knows about you. Many of us met you in person, and we have massive gratitude and respect for you. You give voice to us, you give voice to other Irish people who would like to express themselves but possibly don't have an opportunity how. I just as Peter mentioned, I met a few people from this amazing group back in 2014. Back then we protested against the sale of Mistrals to Putin, which is French warships. I just want to highlight how actually far-sighted these people are. And just as Peter mentioned before, you don't know the impact that you're doing, but we actually know now how important this is to have the voice. Ukrainians have had zero voice because of a massive Russian media presence in the global media, because of the equalizing Soviet Union and Russian Empire with Russian Federation and many things like that. Thanks to you, we know what's going on. Thanks to you, everybody else knows what's going on. This is covered in the media. But most importantly, John shared a few pieces with me before, and I was shocked in a very good way, as in how somebody else who's potentially never even been to Ukraine has such deep understanding. In some pieces you can feel the pain when you read them, and they're so emotional. I was crying like a kid. In this day and age, and with having atrocities on the internet, in the media, you become like a stone, because otherwise you burn out. But it is poetry. It is these pure feelings that made me cry. I want to give you a loud round of applause again, because you are our heroes. Thank you very much. And we may have a couple of newly arrived Ukrainians here, so I'd like to give literally a couple of words in Ukrainian, just maybe to pass a couple of sentiments that Peter shared us here, if that's okay. Друзі, я хотів би передати дві історії, можливо, хтось не розуміє англійською, я хотів би передати буквально кілька історій, які нам щойно розказав перед мікрофоном відомий ірландський драматург Пітер Шерідан з приводу того, що пов'язує ірландців з українцями. Чому, власне, це відбувається? Він почав з історії про футбольний клуб в Дубліні на Драмкондрі, який виступав під українськими кольорами, вірніше, жовто-синіми кольорами, так, які є кольорами нашого прапору теж. І він розказував історію про коли його батько возив його і його братів на велосипеді, на рамі, на рулю і на багажнику. І як вони приїздили і дивилися футбольні матчі там. І один із перших темношкірих гравців в ірландській збірній теж грав за цей клуб. І відповідно, як ви знаєте, ірландці мають дуже чудове почуття гумору. І хтось, коли цьому гравцеві дали червону картку, а гравця цього звали Рейчел, хтось сказав, що це Рейчел нерівність, тобто як расова нерівність. Так? І весь стадіон 20 тисяч людей сміявся. Це була чудова така підводка до того, що неможливо залишатися байдужим до якоїсь дискримінації, неможливо залишатися байдужим до таких жахливих злочинів. Він розказував ще дуже багато історій, вони насправді всі були дуже цікаві, і я думаю, вам теж цікаво було познайомитися з творами, які в цій книзі. Саме через це, через сприйняття ірландців несправедливості і сприйняття ірландцями України. Слава Україні!
Russians at work. Next, I want to introduce you to Yuri Rubachov. He is a fairly recently arrived councillor at the Ukrainian embassy, so we welcome him both to Ireland and to our book launch here. Yuri.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to be here today among true friends of Ukraine. There would be no politics in my speech today. I just want to say thank you. Thank you to those who stand with Ukraine and to those who support Ukraine and to every single one of those who were protesting on Orwell Road from the beginning of this unprovoked and barbaric Russian aggression against our country. Ukraine will never forget the Irish opening their homes and hearts to the Ukrainians fleeing the war and saving our children from the barbaric actions of the Russian army in Ukraine. The war is not over yet, and we still need your further help and support. And now, if you allow me, I would like to also say a couple of words in Ukrainian. Я хотів би подякувати українській громаді за те, що ви робите, ви протестуєте, ви тримаєте українське питання в фокусі, ви організовуєте проукраїнські заходи. Це дуже важливо. Дякую вам. Слава Україні! Thank you.
Along with Helen Dwyer and Julian Vignoles, John Farrelly is one of the editors of the book, and he will speak next. I'm not going to say anything about John because I know I'll get it in the neck tomorrow if I do. I will say, in the words of P. Flynn, he is a class act.
Good evening, everybody. Just my role is to say a few words about the group and about the background to the anthology. Now, the first thing to say about this group is that it is very diverse and very broad. We encompass up to 50 people from a wide range of backgrounds, origins, and occupations. The majority of people in the group are either retired or semi-retired, but are still actively involved in many areas. Now, this is the important thing. Like any group of Irish citizens or residents, members do not agree on everything. Sometimes they don't agree on anything. People have different views on economic, social, and political issues. People follow different teams in sports, and people have different tastes in food and music. However, on one issue, we all stand united, and that is our complete opposition to the criminal and illegal invasion of Ukraine by Putin and his murderous regime. I'm sure you've all heard the term, the personal is political. Well, in the context of our protest, the political is very personal. Each member of the group has made their own personal journey to make a stand outside the Russian embassy. To quote Eileen from her piece in the anthology, "This one reached out to me." And it is true, each member of the group has been personally touched and impacted by the terrible scenes of murder and destruction emanating from the cities, towns, and villages of Ukraine. Now, the group itself. The group is organic, it's non-hierarchical, and functions in a fluid and open manner. There is no chair, there's no secretary, there's no formal meeting, there's no treasurer. We don't take minutes, none are circulated. In fact, for many months, many months, people were only known to each other by their first names. For example, we had Poet Helen, Quaker Helen, Cork Helen, Jeff Helen, Big John, Small John, Cork John, Mr. C, Mr. D. More recently, however, people's second names are being used. And you'll see when you purchase the anthology itself, group members have purposely not used their surnames. And this is to remain somewhat anonymous, but most importantly, to maintain the focus on the suffering and destruction in Ukraine. As we protested over the months, the idea emerged about putting down on paper the thoughts and motivations of group members and why they continue to protest. The concept of compiling an anthology took hold, and group members were asked to contribute, with 34 taking the opportunity to do so. The outcome is the published book we have today. The early drafts of the anthology were circulated to a number of publishers, several of whom expressed positive interest but did not commit to publish. Via a contact from Poet Helen, an approach was made to Mercia Press in Cork, who responded very positively. And Mary Feehan, who's with us here tonight from Mercia Press. Where's Mary? Mary, she's hiding down there. Was really taken by the contents of the anthology and was instrumental in getting the draft document to final publication. A big thanks goes out to Mary and Karina and all at Mercia for their interest and support, and I just think that deserves a large round of applause. Now, people regularly ask why we continue to protest, or as Brendan often terms it, demonstrate. I believe we do it for three main reasons. Firstly, to demonstrate our complete opposition to Putin's criminal invasion of Ukraine. Secondly, to support the people of Ukraine in the defence of their country. And thirdly, to support Russian people who oppose the war but who cannot openly demonstrate this. We've been protesting and demonstrating outside of the embassy for over a year now, and whatever minor hardships or difficulties we have to put up with, they pale into insignificance when compared to the hardships and challenges faced by the people of Ukraine. Now, the Russian ambassador, he gets a special mention, obviously. The Russian ambassador, Yuri Filatov, accused us of being thugs on a Russian TV channel prior to Christmas. While some people have said we get paid for our picketing. Well, I would like to disabuse people on behalf of all the protesters. We are certainly not thugs, and we are certainly not paid. Only this week, Filatov thuggishly threatened this country with a disrespectful outburst following the death of Irishman Finbar Kafarki in Ukraine. As the banner designed by Lorraine correctly puts it, and unfortunately it isn't up, this is an example of lies, lies and more lies from Filatov and the Russian embassy. We say, or I say it definitely anyway, that Filatov and his crew should, in the memorable words of Dimfne, clear off. Let them pack their bags and skip back to their puppet masters of the Kremlin. If there has to be a Russian diplomatic mission in Dublin, let it be the same size as the Irish embassy in Moscow. We demand that Putin and his war machine withdraw from Ukraine so that the Ukrainian people can decide and determine their own future. If we have learned anything from Hitler and the 1930s, is that you do not appease fascism, you oppose it. So let's all actively oppose Putin's fascist regime. Finally, I'd like to welcome you all to join us on our peaceful protest at the Russian embassy if you have a free morning, an afternoon, or a few hours to spare. We are a very open and friendly group, so please come and join us on Orwell Road and demonstrate your right to protest against Putin's barbarism. And I say that with an open heart on behalf of all the members of the protest group. To conclude, I would just like to read a short poem entitled Summer Shells. And it contrasts the summer of 2022 for children in Ireland versus children in Ukraine. Summer Shells. Fanor Beach, County Clare, my two granddaughters at precious play. Amid windy whirls and granular grains, the emerging castle holds all sway. With nature's elegance, seashells embellish their hand-sanded display. The kite overhead with its trailing tails, I hold tight in the cloudless sky. Summer sun on the glistening dunes, the wave lick, lap leisurely and spy, on a scene so normal from a childhood tale to remain in my mind's eye. In Ukraine, man-made shells from above shatter the innocent's peace, as calloused fingers on unsafety catches prepare for the deadly release of shrapnel shards which scatter wide and ingrain deep in human flesh. Children are maimed, disabled and killed for a demented despot's wish. Thank you.
P. Flynn was right, a class act. And now we are going to have some short readings from the anthology by three of the authors. Terry, Joan and Declan will read. After Terry reads, we will have an interlude when Yulia Shinkarenko will sing two pieces of music, the Hallelujah and a Ukrainian song. So Terry first, please.
Thoughts on standing outside the Russian embassy in Orwell Road are very small.
No, the microphone is big.
My late mother was born on the 24th of February. Every year on that day, I bring the first of the spring planters to my parents' and grandparents' graves. This was the plan on the 24th of February, 2022. I heard the 6 a.m. news on RTE1 radio and cried for the people of Ukraine. I made coffee and wrote to the Ukrainian embassy expressing my sorrow and support. I was definitely in shock. I did put the flowers on the graves that day and I cried again, not for the loss of my parents, but for the people of Ukraine. It was a grey, cold, drizzly day. Later that day, I walked up to the Russian embassy, a place I have passed on walks for 30 years. There were people standing around outside, sad, shocked, and fearful people. I stood with them. I went to the embassy repeatedly and found myself standing outside it with a band of people. I crocheted a Ukrainian flag and placed it in my porch. I placed the yellow and blue ribbon on my coat and it's still there. I repeatedly asked fellow protesters, how will this end? I had to stop watching the news because it affected an already very bad sleep pattern. The constant theme of conversations outside the embassy was, there is so little we can do, but we have to do something. 14 months on, I still stand outside the Russian embassy. In my case, I stand in silence. I stand with the simple blue and yellow flag. I stand in witness for the atrocities committed by the Russians against the women and children, the old, the disabled and sick people, and also animals. There is little else I can do. I donate, but I believe that protest is necessary. My way of protesting is silent. I am not a bystander. I am a witness. When I walk up the road, I feel relieved to find other like-minded people are still there, protesting, witnessing. I will continue for as long as I have the health and strength to do it. I pray for peace, but I know that Putin cannot be trusted, and I leave resolution to the Ukrainian people, whose blood has been shed in defence of their sovereign democratic state.
And I now ask Yulia to sing her 2 pieces.
There was secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, minor fall and the major lift. Powerful king composes hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Your faith was strong, but you needed proof. I saw her bathing on a roof, her beauty and the moonlight overthrew you. She tied you to a kitchen chair, she broke your throne and she got your hair, and from your lips she drew the hallelujah. Hallelujah, oh hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Well, baby, I've been here before. I've seen this room and I walked this floor. I used to live alone before I knew ya. I've seen your flag on the marble arch. Love is not a victory march. It's cold and it's a broken hallelujah. Hallelujah, oh hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I did my best, but it wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I've told the truth, I didn't come to fool you. And even though it all went wrong, I stand before the Lord of song, but nothing on my tongue but hallelujah. Hallelujah, oh hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here, for not being silent. We really appreciate it. Thank you. I also want to sing one of our traditional Ukrainian songs. It's called Одна Калина. And it's about as long as we have family, the house, and a tree beside our home, we will be dancing and we will be celebrating the life. It's a happy song. So everyone needs to smile and maybe clap. Louder, please. Сумно, сумно аж за край, не дивись на мене, грай музику, грай. Зимно, зимно на душі, та не дивись на мене, тільки залиши одну калину за вікном, одну родину за столом, одну стежину, щоб додому йшла сама, одну любов на все життя, одну журбу до забуття, і Україну, бо в нас іншої нема. Одну калину за вікном, одну родину за столом, одну стежину, щоб додому йшла сама, одну любов на все життя, одну журбу до забуття, і Україну, бо в нас іншої нема. Сумно, сумно аж за край, а чого ж ти плачеш, грай музику, грай. Крапля горя не стає, наливай, козаче, вона ще є. Одна калина за вікном, одна родина за столом, одна стежина, і щоб додому йшла сама, одна любов на все життя, одна журба до забуття, і Україна, бо в нас іншої нема. Сила в нас. Power is in us. We can do it, guys. Stand with Ukraine. Сумно, сумно я засну, краще буду думать про свою весну. А й піду за небо край, краще так останнє, грай музику, грай. То ту калину за вікном, то ту родину за столом, одну стежину, і щоб додому йшла сама, одну любов на все життя, одну журбу до забуття, і Україну, бо в нас іншої нема. Одну калину за вікном, одну родину за столом, одну стежину, і щоб додому йшла сама, одну любов на все життя, одну журбу до забуття, і Україну, бо в нас іншої нема. Одну калину за вікном, одну родину за столом, одну стежину, і щоб додому йшла сама, одну любов на все життя, одну журбу до забуття, і Україну, бо в нас іншої нема. Thank you.
And now we have Joan. Joan doesn't live 100 miles from the embassy. She's one of our fittest protesters, and I know it's a dangerous thing to say to a woman, but one of our oldest as well, and we are so proud of her. My granddad used to hit me for making remarks like that. That would explain the brain damage. Joan, and after Joan we will have Declan.
Over my garden wall. Over my garden wall, it is Russian soil. It is that close to me, the Russian embassy. Its inhabitants privileged and protected by diplomatic immunity, which gives cover to these agents of death and destruction to continue their genocide and crimes against humanity. Spies, liars, experts in propaganda to justify their illegal invasion of Ukraine. It is midnight. A beautiful full moon shines down, and I open the blind of my kitchen window. All is silent. The daily group of protesters have long since gone home. The chanting of "shame on you" and the honking of car horns has died away. An eerie silence reigns. These privileged and protected people are sleeping in their beds, resting and dreaming up more lies and plans for atrocities and propaganda to justify their evil deeds to the world. How can this be right? I am overcome by a feeling of despair and helplessness. My thoughts then turn to the proud and patriotic Ukrainian people, whose courage and indomitable spirit of endurance will not be broken. We must believe that their determination to achieve independence, freedom, and justice will not wane, and that those who have paid the ultimate price by giving their lives for their country will not have died in vain, that they will be free. Under a moonlit sky at midnight, looking over the garden wall into Russian soil, I say to you, Vladimir Putin, Yuri Filatov, and all your spies and agents of death and destruction, shame on you all. Slava Ukraini.
We now have Mr. D, or Declan. We've learned his name lately. Declan keeps an eye on the Gardaí in terms of our rights to protest within the law. When Declan is finished, Paul will lead us in the singing of the Ukrainian national anthem. Every time Paul arrives up at the embassy, he carries out this act, and it's cheering, and we know it's one of the things that does annoy the Russians. So well done, Paul.
Thanks, Peter.
Shame on you.
Bit worried. Hack family steed, as we say, outside the embassy.
Testing. I won't start again. But one thing I'll just say, Peter, I'm always very worried when my name is mentioned in the company of An Garda Síochána, so just be careful. I suppose the reason that I've come down to the Russian embassy is really important to me personally. It's why I stand with Ukraine and why I came to protest down there, because it affects me. I cannot unsee the television images, the horror and inhumanity of a senseless war ordered by an insane, tyrannical, powerful dictator who believes he has the right to annihilate a country and exterminate its people simply because he believes they should not exist. It affects me. The elderly lady in the wheelchair being carried across a narrow makeshift single walkway over a river with its destroyed bridge, part of a long line of people, families, their lives in suitcases or plastic carrier bags, desperately fleeing the bombs and the horror of war and not understanding why it's happening. I sit in my house, safe and warm, and I can see all this in real time on my television. A little Ukrainian girl, 7 years of age, singing "Let It Go" to cheer up distraught and fearful neighbours in an underground Kiev bomb shelter. It affects me. Broken, twisted, bloody little bodies not moving, lying in the rubble of bombed apartments, hospitals, schools and playgrounds. The innocent victims of unguided munitions and deliberate, targeted shelling. Their young lives violently extinguished, their families fragmented, all at the pull of a lever on a Russian weapon of destruction from a safe distance miles away, or from a push of a remote button 2 decks down in a Russian ship on the Black Sea. The air raid sirens sound and death falls indiscriminately from the sky. Genocide. It affects me. But there are other ways to unleash terror. Russian soldiers in Irpin see the family running. A young woman and two small children, a boy and a girl. They're no threat and have no weapons. They're simply terrified and running for their lives. The Russians bring their rifles up. Maybe they're semi-automatic AK-74s. They'll have a muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second and a rate of fire and bursts of 100 rounds a minute. They pull their triggers. In Bucha, as they retreat, Russian forces simply leave murdered civilians on the streets, hands bound behind their backs. A signature for all democratic countries to see, the price of resistance and freedom. It affects me. On and on it goes. Indiscriminate bombing, the levelling of beautiful historical cities, rape, murder, the forced migration of millions of Ukrainian women and children, maybe never to see their husbands and fathers alive again. The cold, unemotional and insane planning to exterminate a free, democratic, peaceful country. Bucha, Chernihiv, Irpin, Izium, Kharkiv, Kherson, Kramatorsk, Mariupol, Severodonetsk, Slavyansk. It is barbaric. The anguish of Ukraine and the world cries out for justice. It affects me. What can I do? Unlike the people in Russia who object to this unjust war, I can use my own constitutional rights under the freedom of my country's constitution and the European Court of Human Rights. I can come here to the Russian embassy on Orwell Road in Dublin and be a small voice for Ukraine and humanity, addressing the representatives, so-called diplomats of this evil Russian regime, and denounce its hateful, vile actions against the free world. Ukraine must endure to be free again. We are witnesses. We will remember. Slava Ukraini, Berbua agus Banat.
Україні, і слава, і воля, ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Звинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запанує милі браття у своїй сторонці. Душа й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Can you just stick down for 1 or 2 more minutes? Thank you so much for that, Paul. In conclusion, just like to thank a few people. First of all, Peter, of course, for an astounding speech, and I knew Artem would be puzzled by that, how to deliver that in Ukrainian. We'd like to thank Mercier Press for taking on the project in the first place and then for bringing it to fruition. The editors in particular would like to thank Mary Feehan, who they said has done Trojan work in helping them to get the work to the deadline. We want to thank our hosts here, Hodges Figgis. It is said that you will never be lonely in a library or a bookshop. This is one of my favourite places in Dublin, and it's a place, if anyone ever wants to bump into me, Saturday afternoons about 2 o'clock, I think I'll wander around. You can pay for the coffee. We want to thank Ukrainian Action and Artem, who have kept us in touch with their community. And finally, we want to thank the media. There's a horrible phrase called war fatigue. The only people who should suffer from war fatigue are the people who are being kept awake night after night as missiles flow across their cities. But nevertheless, it does represent a certain truth about humanity, that as tragedies go on and on, people tend to want to forget. So we thank those who keep these stories and keep these issues in the public eye. Absolutely finally, I want to say, I've had a quick look at the anthology, and I think it is far better than ever we could have hoped for. I want to thank the editors, John, Helen and Julian. Buy this book if you want to have a memory of our time together on Orwell Road. Buy this book if you want your children and your grandchildren to get an answer to the question, what did you do in the war, Granny or Grandad? Buy this book if you want a testament to non-party political peaceful action by ordinary citizens. You will not be disappointed. Thank you.